Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Hello, everyone. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. I hope that you're well and secure. We're going to continue with this writing of Nichiren's The Selection of the Time, or Selecting the Right Time, as it's called here. We're going to enter a section now where Nichiren is getting a little more specific about the questions he might receive from some of his, well, as you well know, there are other sects of Buddhism that are all vying for attention from the shogunate and the elite, the ruling elite, to try to get donations of land or monies, seeking security through their relationships, person to person, with people of power. But as people of power, their power is in their distribution of their thoughts, their thinking, and their use of the writings of Buddhism. And so it serves them to have certain interpretations be more valid, more powerful, more useful, really, than others. And so their scholarship, rather than being used to teach people according to the scholarship, they use it academically in a way to empower or enrich their own position, and in doing so, provide a framework that seems unique, better than, as opposed to, other teachers, and with that position gain a larger share, basically. It's very simple. But the people who practice under those teachers don't know this, or even if they suspect it, they'd rather not think about that. They'd rather just do as they're told. And because they're told these stories in certain ways of thinking, when Nichiren comes along and tries to correct the record and get back to the authentic teachings, he runs into these questions. Well, you say that, but, from what we know, this. So what do you say to that? So what do you say to this? So where do you find that? How can you say that when we learn this? That kind of question and interrogation going on. So on the one hand, there are major debates between schools under the auspices of the state, and they're public, so everyone can be swayed with the debate, the lively debate, and see who's correct. On the other hand, there's debates every day with that are unorganized, right? Just with other Buddhists. And this is where the term shakubuku actually has meaning. In the West, there's a lot of misunderstanding about shakubuku. And so the idea of shakubuku, breaking the bones of, this is used as a breaking the misinterpretations of other Buddhists. Not grabbing a Christian by the lapel and getting them to understand that their childish whatevers, belief systems in, things that aren't real, they're not provable. They're not experienced. They're fantasies. With Buddhists, they have similar troubles, but they have documentation to show. No, if you look at the documentation, it's very consistent. And this is something that we're learning as students of Buddhism, right? That the more we read, the more we investigate other sutras, reread the Lotus Sutra, certainly reading through Nichiren's Goshos, there's this constant realignment of the same things. It doesn't deviate. What deviates are the various other schools and thoughts that aren't in the actual authenticated documents. They're additions to or interpretations of, and they're always off the mark. So Nichiren keeps bringing it back to center, and the more we study, the more we read, not just Nichiren, but the actual sutras, the more we get these same core messages coming through, right? The truth will bear out. And so what we're doing is nothing different than what has been done for thousands of years with the scholarship of Buddhism, is that if you're willing to study broadly the scholarship of Buddhism, the stuff that doesn't belong, it's like a sore thumb, as they say, really shows up. That's not anywhere else but right here. If I follow what everything else says, what doesn't belong, right? Of these things, which doesn't belong? The extraneous stuff, the deviations, they show up, and you can tell that doesn't belong. It's a very, very consistent teaching that Shakyamuni took on from the very get-go. And Nichiren's going to talk here with his question and answer format about this misnomer that Shakyamuni taught to people's intelligence. That's a westernization of thinking right there. It may have not started in the West, but certainly in Buddhism, there was this rumor that, Shakyamuni taught to stupid people first, and then as they got smarter, he taught to them more and more profoundly. It has nothing to do with intelligence, or their resolve, their confidence, right? It had to do with their capacity, not intelligence, their ability, their experience, their life experience had enough complexity in their mind. First of all, realizing that their mind was something real, but not in this body, of this body, but not in it. Yeah. To really get that concept is to us, it's a very simple matter, right? We get it. Most get it. How to use that, how it profoundly affects and informs and actually is the substance of our experience, that's not immediately obvious. And that's what Buddhism has been teaching all along. So for people who weren't as aware that the mind is an emergent property of the body, right? The three bodies of Buddha is the very story of what I'm saying right now. The reward body, the manifest body, the Dharma body, the mind. Working together, they change the entire experience of life, albeit dissected from three different points of view. It's the same thing. It's the experience of this life, for which this physical body is an important tool of reference as we course through. If we course through life, that assumes a body, but it also assumes a body that is nourished by that experience, reward for being. But being cannot be spoken of simply by an organism plodding along. Being is in equal measure the experience of being. The whole idea of time, space is the mind's work. It's a system. Yeah? Make sense? All right, let's get into it. The Lotus Sutra during the ages of the true Dharma and the semblance Dharma. Question. The intelligence of the people and their conviction in the age of the true Dharma were inferior to those during the time of the Buddha, but they were superlative compared to those of the semblance and latter ages. Here's this argument, right? And yet, why was not the Lotus Sutra spread at the beginning of the age of the true Dharma? After all, was it not the 1,000-year period of the age of the true Dharma that such great Buddhist leaders as Ashvaghosha, Nagarjuna, Deva, and Asanga appeared? And Bodhisattva Vasubandhu, author of 1,000 tracts, wrote the commentary on the Lotus Sutra, declaring the sutra to be the first among all sutras? According to Tripitaka Master Paramartha, furthermore, more than 50 people propagated the lotus in India, and Vasubandhu was only one of them. Does this not mean that the Lotus Sutra was widely spread during the age of the true Dharma? At about the middle of the age of the semblance Dharma, Grandmaster Tendai, appearing in China, wrote the 30-facile triple work of the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra. The words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, and the great concentration and insight, revealing the heart of the Lotus Sutra. Toward the end of the age of semblance Dharma, Great Master Dengyo appeared in Japan and spread the perfect meditation and perfect wisdom of the Lotus Sutra, transmitted from Grandmaster Tendai. Not only did he achieve that, he also established the great perfect and sudden precept dais on Mount Hiei, making Japan entirely the land of the perfect precepts, where everyone from the emperor on down to the populace looked up to the Rakyuji temple as their leader. Does it not mean that the Lotus Sutra was widely spread in the age of the semblance Dharma? So this is an interesting question because we read a lot about the Lotus Sutra being our self-practice mandate, our sutra of experiencing Buddha, being present and invoking in our brain, our mind, our mind of experience with the Buddha lens, Buddhaness, Buddha clarity, without influence. Yeah? But the truth is, as many of you would point out, the Lotus Sutra was taught during Shakyamuni's lifetime. This was 3,000 years ago. For approximately 8 years of the end of his teaching life, that's all he taught. That was his sermon, his culmination of teaching. So why is now the time as opposed to when he taught it? There's a lot of dialogue about this, and we've been talking about this, and this whole selecting the right time has this dual nature of explaining Shakyamuni's explanation of the capacity of people over 500-year periods, right? That's the big picture. But the smaller picture, the more immediate picture for us at this time, more than 2,500 years after Shakyamuni's extinction. How do I know you're the right person? How do I know you're ready to inculcate this practice into your life? How do I know I'm ready to say anything about it. Am I more intelligent than you are? Are you more intelligent than me? Is it a matter of intelligence? See, all those same questions linger. My little dog has such a trouble breathing. It's an odd noise, so I figure you need to know where that's coming from. So yeah, it's a very immediate question as well, isn't it? We can talk about it in the 500-year abstract, but it's very, very relatable to our interrelationships with people we may know for a long time or not know, strangers, people asking us questions we may or may not know. How do we respond? How much responsibility do we take for what is a relationship? And that relationship has to be born on or carried with Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, its maximal value. Otherwise, we're cheating ourselves and the other in our relationship. We need to be like-minded, itai doshin, right? Many in body, one in mind. So the question goes on. At about the middle of the age of the semblance Dharma, Grandmaster Tendai appeared in China, wrote 30 facets, right? Does it not mean that the lotus was widely spread in the age of the semblance Dharma? So here's Nichiren's response. Although scholars in the world often say that the Buddha preached according to the intelligence and conviction of the audience, actually it is not so according to the Buddha. So disabuse yourself of the idea that you have to be more or less smart in order to practice Buddhism or receive a certain teaching of Buddhism. That's not the equation. If great dharmas are to be preached for those with superior intelligence and conviction, why is it that the Lotus Sutra was not preached upon the attainment of Buddhahood by Shakyamuni? Why wasn't that the first thing out of his mouth? Wow, you guys do this. Why wasn't it like that? Mahayana Sutras should have been spread during the first half or 500 years of the age of the true Dharma. Should have been done right then. If great dharmas are to be preached for those for close relations, in other words, people we know, we have relations with, the Buddha should have preached the Lotus Sutra instead of the such quasi-Mahayana sutras as the Meditation on the Buddha Sutra and the Maya Sutra to his father, King Suddhodana, and mother, Queen Maya. If secret teachings are not to be revealed to those evil people without close relation to and slanderers of the true Dharma, monk virtue consciousness should not have preached the Nirvana Sutra to those numerous violators of the precepts of the Buddha. Or why did Bodhisattva never disparaging is the version that we read earlier, preach the Lotus Sutra to slanderers of the true Dharma? Therefore, I think it is a great mistake to say that dharmas are preached taking the intelligence and conviction of the audience into consideration. It's a much different dynamic than that. It's not a can you do this kind of dynamic. No, this is the way to attain enlightenment, period. But as I've said before, to teach your 2-year-old, your 4-year-old, your 10-year-old, your 20-year-old child doesn't depend on whether or not the child is smart or wanting to learn. They all look at you like you're the source, the original source, right? It's not about that. It's about, are they ready to understand? Are they capable with the tools that they have and the knowledge that they have and the experience that they have to take these concepts and run with them. It's not a matter of want or if they're too stupid to understand. They're simply not ready. Do you see? Question: if it is so, did not such great commentators of Buddhism as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, who appeared in the age of the true Dharma, preach the truth of the Lotus Sutra? Answer: no, they did not. Why would they? The population at the time was not mature enough, was not experienced enough to understand the methodology of the Lotus Sutra. It wasn't because they were stupid. They simply weren't ready. They hadn't developed the capacity yet. Question: what kind of Buddhism did they preach then? Well, they preached quasi-Mahayana, exoteric, and esoteric sutras such as the Flower Garland Sutra, Hodo Sutras, the Wisdom Sutras, right, which we attribute a great deal to Nagarjuna, and the Great Sun Buddha Sutra, but not the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. So you got to keep in mind, I'm going to arrange myself here. You got to keep in mind that the teachings of Buddhism, there we go. The teachings of Buddhism are all pointing to the same thing. But they do so with stories that are culled and designed from either existing stories in the cultures where the teaching is happening, or constructed around the popular idioms and ideologies of the people, stuff they're familiar with. And the stories extend them into new mental ground, new understanding. And this is why I've told you before, a lot of these expedient means, these early stories of earlier sutras, talk a lot about deities and gods and all these personages, not because that's Buddhism, but because that's a method, a way into understanding what Buddhism is. Buddhism isn't the stories. Those are tools to help develop a depth of mind, a perceptive shift that will develop into the capacity to understand how to actualize one's Buddha, how we self-manifest. Yeah? So if you take every single writing, every single sutra, every single commentary of Buddhism, you might see it, as somebody who doesn't understand Buddhism yet, as a vast field of belief systems, right? Consider that India today is full of, you couldn't write down all of the deifications they have and the mysticism they have. The country has over 125 legal recognized languages. And I mean, not dialects, full-on languages. Could you imagine if you live in the United States or the United Kingdom or Canada or Brazil, and your national language, whether it be Portuguese or English or American English, we can talk amongst, let's take the US and the UK, for instance. We both are English-speaking countries. And yet, as odd as the accents and the colloquialisms and the vernaculars of different English-speaking areas in the United States and the UK, we can all communicate using the same language of English. But we're talking in India today, Indian languages, national Indian languages, that if you go from one area to another, cannot communicate. In fact, they have to develop in-between languages just so they can have some. Imagine what school is like. Imagine what the transfer of knowledge is like. It's incredible. Sure, there's 3-4 times the population of the United States in India, but I mean, it would take, if all 50 states in the United States developed their own language, we still would be a long ways away from India in terms of languages, right? Anyway, all of that is to say that although all these languages are different, they're all trying to communicate the same basic things, right? But if you're going to teach a universal to French, Spanish, English, Icelandic, Zulu, how can you do that? You have to, first of all, inculcate your thinking into the language of the people. Shakyamuni said this himself. This is why he taught in Prakrit. He picked a language that was an in-between language, a language of the simpler caste that wasn't so highfalutin and sophisticated that they had to have profound education just to be able to communicate. So Prakrit was one of those languages that could communicate to the vast majority of the people. And he also said that wherever this teaching roams in the world, it should adopt the language of the cultures and the area that it is being taught, the language of the people, wherever it goes. So to those sects who you might hear about, say, no, there's only one language that's the true words of Buddha. Well, they're deeply misinformed. They do not understand Buddhism at all. I know that may sound harsh, but it's the truth. Those people who say Pali, if you don't know Pali, you got to learn Pali. Pali. Pali is the language of the Buddha. No, it isn't. It is not. It's not just me saying this. This is history saying this. He spoke in Prakrit. He didn't write down his sermons. He spoke them. We sang them. Chanting, singing. The structure of the prose section of each chapter of a sutra, it's the singing of the lesson. Because that's how we memorize things, like songs, repeat. And they're all in the first person. I this, I that. We're practicing, chanting, singing our enlightenment. See, it's nothing new. Nichiren didn't invent this. This has been the mode of learning, experiencing, becoming Buddhaness in our personal experience, our mind. And if you're not ready to do that, well, now in this age, all of us are. You can't say, he's not smart enough, she doesn't know enough, or she's intimidating because she's smarter than me. All of us in this age of degeneration, no matter what you think of them or they think of you, that's just the fodder of samsara. That's where we get confused. Because all of us are absolutely capable of chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. It doesn't matter intelligence or attitude. Attitude in that you must have conviction to do it. And that's the main thing that's necessary, is that you get your head around, this is my invocation of Buddha. You got to know that. If you're just playing hopscotch or jumping rope and go, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, well, what are you doing? There is a school of thought that says even if that's what you do, you will be opening your Buddha mind. I grant you. But if you really want to know your Buddhaness, if you want to challenge it and say, am I experiencing this? Is this actually changing my life experience? Then you got to pay attention. You got to really dedicate yourself. Prove it to me. Be obstinate. You'll get proof. After all, if it doesn't prove itself to you, why do it? Of course, we could ask that of 1,000 other religions and get blank stares. Buddhism is not a religion. And this is one of the reasons why I tell you it's not a religion. Because it's not hocus pocus. It's not magic. It's not believing in something coming from above or around or beneath. It's here. Let me continue. Stop interrupting me. Sorry. I think it's healthy to make fun of oneself from time to time. So, they were teaching such sutras as Flower Garland Sutra, Hodo Sutras, Wisdom Sutra, and the Great Sun Buddha Sutra, but not the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. Obvious question, how do you know? How do you know? Answer, it's not easy to know the truth. Oh, thank you, Nichiren. It's nice to know that we're not all crazy for having these thoughts, right? Because not all the religious tracts produced by, and I don't like that they use religious, but you understand, the important writings produced by Bodhisattva Nagarjuna, amounting to as many as 300,000 verses, were transmitted to China and Japan. So that's the first obstacle. We don't have the entire corpus of Nagarjuna's teachings, or Vasubandhu's, or any of them. We just have these later translations that were made either in Gandhara or in China from documents that some exist in scraps, some don't even exist anymore. We can't really say with certainty he said these words. Right? However, we can conjecture what he said in his commentaries left in India from those brought to China, such as the commentary on the 10 stages, or the Middle Doctrine, and the Great Wisdom Discourse. So there are some extant Nagarjuna documents that made it into the hands of Chinese scholars and transcribers, and we have that record. That doesn't amount to every single word that was said, but if these are important documents and they made it into another culture and translation, then there's some merit in those documents, right? And we can, by learning and reading and dissecting those documents that we do have, get a pretty clear picture on where Nagarjuna was coming from, just like anyone else, right? Question, among those tracts by Nagarjuna left behind in India, are there not any superior to those brought over to China? Maybe they didn't all get translated, or maybe their translations were weak. Answer, I dare not conjecture about Bodhisattva Nagarjuna because the Buddha predicts in the Sutra of Transmission of the Buddhist teaching that after his death, a man called Bodhisattva Nagarjuna will appear in southern India expressing his basic ideas in the Middle Doctrine. So he was predicted hundreds of years earlier by Shakyamuni. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And in India, as many as 70 branch schools descended from Bodhisattva Nagarjuna exist, with 70 great commentators, all of whom regard the Middle Doctrine the basic canon. So this was no idle document that just, surfaced and never been seen before. 70 different sects, schools of Buddhism use that document from Nagarjuna as the basis for their Buddhist practice. That's saying something, isn't it? This document was widely held. The gist of the Middle Doctrine, 27 chapters and 4 facils, is the 4-phrase verse saying, quote, everything is begotten by causes and conditions. That's just a restating of the Four Noble Truths, right? Which is consistent with the triple truth of emptiness, which is the great documentation of Nagarjuna's definition of the fake reality, the deluded reality we hang on to is actually, it's a puff, it's empty, it's a construct of mind. Temporariness and the middle path, right? We talked about that before in videos on Nagarjuna and the middle path, how it was like walking life with on one side of us all the stuffness, and on the other side of us understanding that everything's a flow of energy, that we walk the middle path, because with the Buddha mind, bodhisattvas exist in this samsaric world. So to attain Buddhahood is to be in samsara with all of its thingifying, but with the perception of clarity that all of it is superfluous energy and flow, as well as our own bodies. And with that knowledge, we detach ourselves from the possession and ownership of things and simply experience things. There's a release in that. It's a middle ground, yeah? Where was I? This four-phrase verse stands for the four doctrinal teachings, right? All life suffering, suffering comes from attachment, cease the attachments, the formations of attachments, you will release and achieve liberation, Buddhahood, yeah? The triple truth of the Kigan, it's in the Kigan Sutra as well, Hodo and Hanya doctrines, but it does not go so far as to reveal the perfect and interfused triple truth preached in the Lotus Sutra. It's not quite completely evolved. It's helping you go along the way to develop your capacity to understand what is taught in the Lotus Sutra. Yeah. Question: has there ever been anybody else who also asserted this? Answer: Tendai says in his profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, quote, "The Lotus Sutra is so profound that the middle doctrine cannot be compared to it," end quote. It doesn't get that far. He also states in the Great Concentration and Insight, quote, "Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna deep in their hearts knew exactly the teaching of the Lotus Sutra. But outwardly, they preached as they saw to fit the time." Not to fit stupidity or intelligence, to fit the time. People hadn't developed to the experience of life and mind that they could grasp self-realization. They still saw their environment as greatly influencing their life. They weren't ready. And for them to teach it when the child is not ready to learn something, they abstract it, they lose it, they manipulate it into unrecognizable forms. It's a dangerous thing to teach someone a mind when it's not ready to teach itself or learn, right? You can create lots of obstacles that would be very difficult to unlearn if the person isn't ready to learn. Yeah? Explaining what is meant by Tendai and the profound meaning of the Lotus Sutra, Miao Lo declares in his commentary on the profound meaning on the Lotus Sutra, quote, "No one can be compared to the Lotus Sutra in rectifying the fallacies of the various sutras and revealing the truths. And in the additional annotations to the three major works of Tendai, Tsung Yi interprets Tendai's words in the Great Concentration and Insight, quote, both Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu are not comparable to Tendai in perceiving the true intent of the Buddha. Meaning that Tendai's scholarship, his reordering and mastery of all the teachings of Buddhism throughout northern and southern China. Remember the huge debates they had, public debates, where all of these other schools had to drop in abeyance and say, well, we have not understood the teachings of Buddha Tendai. You are the great master. We will follow you. I mean, that's an amazing feat. Remember, China is no slouch population-wise either. Lots of power lords and power centers and land, right, elites and so forth to bear witness to this, changing the whole land of China. That's quite an amazing feat, isn't it? So, we are now going to move on to the treasure, or the treatise on the aspiration for Buddhahood and Pukung's fallacies. So this is getting closer and closer to the time of Nichiren, right? So he's walking us through this scholarly path of Buddhism as it goes through the centuries, and how it deviates, gets brought back to center. Even the questions, which are contemporary for Nichiren, are still hanging on to some of these widened little tributaries of Buddhism that aren't quite the mainstream, and he keeps bringing them back to center, to Buddhism, to Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. And why wasn't it taught from the get-go? Well, people weren't ready. Remember, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo aren't just magic words, or they aren't magic words, I should say. Got to watch my conversational tone sometimes. But they're an invocation of something. And in order to invoke something, you must have some idea and conviction about what that is. You know, when a child gets scared and can't make sense of what's happening to them, and they yell out, "Mother, Mom, Dad," these are concepts they're very familiar with. And they're familiar with them in a very rescuing, protective, embracing sort of way. So they invoke that sensation because that's the one they need at the moment to push away all their fears, their consternation, their worries. Yeah? So what if in your life, the thing that rescues you, so to speak, I don't know, let's say it's maybe it's a lover, maybe it's a Donna or a Bruce or whatever. And your relationship with that person has grown to be far more involving and reliant in your capacity at that age that you're at, well beyond your parents. You might call their name in a moment like this, because those are known quantities, sensations, all-encompassing. So what does it take for you and I to see Buddhaness as that? What kind of conviction, what kind of knowing do you have to whenever you're challenged with something that doesn't make sense, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. I mean, I do it without thinking. Now, I've been practicing a heck of a long time. But if I want that kind of all-encompassing comfort, feeling of being known, feeling of being protected, there's nothing else I can invoke in my mind. I immediately go to Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Right? That's why it's Buddhist training. It's Buddhist practice. In martial arts or in dance or in sports, we all know this. You will do as you practice, you do. You will play the game the way you train to play the game. When the day of the game comes, you may have fanciful thoughts about how you might fly through the air and do something, but when it actually happens, you actually do doing that which you have practiced doing. And sometimes we get angry with ourselves, thinking, I haven't practiced this correctly because when I was faced with the moment, I did it wrong. I did it stupidly. I did it ineffectually. I need to get my practice right so that when I'm confronted, I automatically do as I should. This is the samsaric devil in the details, right? The tails. We want to get the details right. We want to make sure the detail is right. Right? A detail is a set of practices, and a detail is that moment. So we get the details to actualize our Buddhaness by practicing doing our detail of chanting, enshrining mandala, focusing, chanting, singing, and reciting. That's our Buddhist. I'm going to lose it now. That's our Buddhist detail, right? Detail. Our detail. Stress on the E. Our detail is our system of practice, our study, our chanting, our reciting, right? With an enshrined Gohonzon, mandala of Gohonzon. But the detail, that's an emphasis too. English is weird. Detail, emphasis on tail. Detail is the singular thing. The detail is the stepped thing. You can check that out in a dictionary for me if you like. I'm just stumbling over my own words, as I seem to always have done. Communication is such a difficult thing. Anyway, I think you get my meaning. And before we go on to the next section, I think that's long enough for this video, we will be dealing with Pukung's perceived mastery, but he made many mistakes, and Nichiren's going to tear him apart. Now, he's a Tripitaka master, which was very revered in his day, which now we can see he's getting more and more intimate with the current state of affairs in Japan, and he's going to deal with each of those, I suspect, singularly, to demonstrate that the teaching has always been a straight line, that these deviations, they just have to fall away because they're just not correct. They're not the way to practice Buddhism. Thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading the audio podcasts. We're getting up close to 600 of them on the Podbean audio podcast network, which you can just look up the Buddhahood podcast on wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Apple or Google or whatever. It'll come up. And I think I put a search feature in there last year. I hope it works. I should probably spend more time testing these different avenues. I'm so busy researching, thinking about these talks, that I want to make sure they're effectual. And I rely, quite honestly, on the scholarship of Nichiren and Shakyamuni and these groups who translate these things, and my experience, my own personal experience studying these things, and to create value for you guys. So hopefully I'm doing that. Hopefully you're getting some insights, those aha moments we all need. That's what builds our conviction and helps us know that when we're invoking Myoho Renge Kyo, that we're present, I'm ready to inculcate it, single-mindedly meeting Buddha, bringing Buddha about in our samsaric mind. Hi. Thank you again. Thank you for liking, for distributing these videos. Subscribe. Mouth isn't working great today, is it? patrons, I need more of you guys. But what you guys are doing, I mean, if you can encourage someone else to support this Sangha and participate, obviously, that's just immeasurable, amazing. And you will get great fortune from it. I don't mean money. It may be money, but what we want is our highest potential manifestation of our lives, isn't it? That's why we want Buddhaness. Remove all obstacles from our best selves. And with that, I will see you in the next one. Namo Myo Renge Kyo. Bye for now.